This is Carolyn Pratt. She was an innovator and an inventor in the field of early childhood education. Our book spells her name L-Y-N, but it's actually L-I-N-E. It's how she spells it. She lived, worked, and studied in New York, and her work was a big part of the progressive education movement at the turn of the 20th century. Her teaching philosophy focused on active learning, open-ended materials, and real-life experiences for kids. The legacy of her work is visible in many ways today, and her philosophies influenced many of the other thinkers and education models that we've talked about in class. Carolyn Pratt was born in 1867 in the small rural town of Fayetteville, New York. Like most other Americans at the time, her experience at school was the conventional style, with rows and rows of wooden desks that were fixed to the floor and one teacher at the front of the classroom with all the students just repeating rote lessons. However, living in a rural area, she had lots of opportunity for free play and active exploration, and these are the things that would later influence her classroom style as an educator. After graduating high school, she spent 5 years teaching first grade at her hometown, but decided that she needed to move on to further her education. In 1892, she moved to New York City to attend Teachers College. This would have been a significant change for a 25-year-old from a small rural town. After 2 years at the teaching college, she transferred to the Philadelphia Normal School. She would be back in New York by 1901 to dedicate her life's work to children in New York City. While Carolyn Pratt was at the Philadelphia Normal School, she began her studies in kindergarten education. As her education continued, she added a certification in woodworking. It probably seems a little bit random that as a teacher she would be pursuing so much time studying woodworking, but it actually played a significant role in her teaching philosophy. Woodworking focused on hands-on learning, as it was a manual task. It had to do with the practical skills and real-life experiences that she was interested in introducing to children. It obviously has to do with construction, which again applies hands-on learning, practical skills, real-life experiences. It involves independent exploration. While woodworking, you're using creative skills, you're using math skills, and as you create a design, you're exploring these concepts independently. Ultimately, she developed her own toy line called To Do With Toys, which applied all of these concepts and focused on toys that would allow children to construct knowledge through play. Pratt became a special instructor at a new program at the Philadelphia Normal School. This program focused on providing woodworking classes specifically to teaching majors. In this program, Pratt taught other teachers woodworking skills. She focused on the relationship between the hands-on learning that occurred through the manual tasks of woodworking with other opportunities to apply this learning style to academic areas in the classroom. This is a news brief about the program at the school. It says, "The class in woodworking was established in the Girls' Normal School at Philadelphia 3 years ago, has proved itself a marked success, and those who have watched the experiment are confident that this will induce other institutions for the education of women to take up that branch of manual training." So it was unusual for women to be woodworking in the first place. It was also a novel idea that woodworking could be so closely applied to the profession of teaching. Woodworking was significant in her life because she basically invented blocks, or at least she invented blocks as we know them. She invented what are called unit blocks, which are this very recognizable style we have here. And they're called unit blocks because each piece is a standard size. And because they're a standard size, not only can they teach things like balance, but they can also teach math by looking at fractions, how this piece is a fraction of a larger square piece. And so you'll recognize these from any block center that you've ever seen in a classroom. And Caroline Pratt is the one that invented those. This right here is a funny play on words. This is a unit block company based in one of the Carolina states, and so they call themselves the Carolina Pratt unit blocks. But these are images of children in her city country school using blocks. Here are some early versions, and these are the blocks that we know and play with every day in a preschool classroom. Pratt spent years observing children. One of her observations was a 2-month experiment that she conducted in Greenwich Village, New York. She provided children with open-ended materials. For the next 2 months, she observed how they used the materials to express their understanding of the world around them. She consistently found in her observations that the more that children were able to participate in their lessons, the more that they gained from their learning experiences. Her experiment inspired her to open the Play School. The Play School centered on a constructivist approach. Curriculum followed the children's interests, and the children were encouraged to recreate their real-life experiences through play. These were radical ideas for an educational model in 1913. The Play School gained support from the Bureau of Educational Experiments and eventually expanded to become City and Country School. City and Country School was officially established in 1914. It continued the focus of hands-on learning, practical skills, and independent exploration. Curriculum included field trips. There were child-run enterprises at the school, such as a school store and a post office that the children ran themselves. The focus was always on authentic learning experiences, so experiences that related to the children's day-to-day lives. This is a quote of hers at the bottom of the page that reads, "Was it unreasonable to try to fit the school to the child rather than the child to the school?" As an innovator in the progressive education movement, she moved away from the conventional style of passive learning. Pratt believed that learning was fundamentally a social process. She wanted her school to allow the students to have a deep connection with what they were experiencing. Curriculum at her school would be child-led and would focus on independent exploration as well as group interactions, and would always involve hands-on activities. City and Country School continues to operate today. It's still located in Greenwich Village, and it serves ages 2 to 13. Classrooms are filled with open-ended materials, and play is central to the curriculum. Students are encouraged to take on roles in the school community in which they have real responsibility. This begins with the youngest ages, and it's formalized in the jobs program that they have for middle and upper school students. So this continues Carolyn Pratt's idea of having children work with real experiences and do things at school that they can apply to real life. The tradition started with the child-run enterprises at the school store and the post office in 1914 and continues today. City and Country is a thriving community that operates on the philosophies of its founders. This is a quotation from their website. It says, "Our teachers know it is more important to pose good questions than to offer answers to which a student feels no connection. The right question will spawn hypotheses and experiments, as well as research and conclusions. The right question will set the group on a journey that will lead deep into their subject of study." This describes the inquiry-based lesson plan process that we've practiced in class. The piece below is also from their website. It's a description of their emergent curriculum and reminded me of the project approach that we had been learning about. It says, how a child learns to learn will impact his or her life forever. It all starts with a block, and that block leads to a study in balance, which becomes a field trip to the library, which informs a book of research that evolves into a study of urban planning, which leads to complex historical structures, to the making of maps, which takes us across the Oregon Trail and to the Middle Ages, into an exploration of the printed word and a play about the Greek gods and the various roles we play in the world, like filmmaker or a pediatrician or a writer of fiction or anything else. This really carries out what Carolyn Pratt had imagined of child-led curriculum and a child's deep involvement in what they were learning, especially focusing on real-life experiences. Closely related to City and Country School is the Bank Street School, which was founded by Lucy Sprague Mitchell. The Bureau of Educational Experiments, which provided the funding to establish City and Country School, eventually became Bank Street. Lucy Sprague Mitchell and Carolyn Pratt, along with the schools that they established, were both big parts of the progressive education era movement at the turn of the century. Like City and Country School, Bank Street focuses on learning through direct experience, connecting the classroom to the outside world, and gaining an understanding of oneself through the interaction with the environment. Bank Street continues to operate today. It includes primary, middle, and upper level grades, and it has a graduate school for teachers. Here are a couple of other big fans of Carolyn Pratt. John Dewey cited and described Pratt's work as he developed his theory and philosophies of pragmatism. Pragmatism focuses on practical experiences in education and is the basis of the Bank Street model. John Dewey agreed with Pratt's ideas that children should learn through active inquiry and should be able to interact with their curriculum and take an active part in their own learning. Another person who was influenced by Carolyn Pratt is the architect and playground designer David Rockwell. He is the creator of what's known as the Imagination Playground, which is a mobile playground. It's made of giant blue foam blocks that children can assemble themselves. It makes kids the designers of their own playground, and the playgrounds can be set up in any area where the blocks can fit. Here you can see some kids experimenting with a ramp that they built. There are other images of teeter-totters that they've made, slides, etc. So he was influenced by Pratt's idea of children being able to use construction on their own and create their own learning experience with open-ended materials. The artist Thomas Hart Benton featured Pratt in his 1930 painting, America Today. The painting is a giant mural made of 10 different panels showing different aspects of American life. It's located at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. This is the panel that includes Pratt. Can you find her? I'll give you a second. This is her right here. Here she is talking to a child and his mother. I thought it was interesting that a painting that would include important American social movements and artistic forms like jazz and cinema would also include a figure in education. I thought that was a pretty neat way to honor Pratt and the work that she did, in addition to honoring the progressive education movement that was happening around this time. Carolyn Pratt wrote a memoir published in 1948 called I Learn from Children. She talks about her observations, experiments, the process of opening city and country school, and how these experiences shaped her views of early childhood education. Carolyn Pratt passed away in 1954. However, her legacy lives on through her research, the school she established, her influence on other educators, social thinkers, and theorists, and in the block centers of schools and homes all across the world.